Good afternoon from London. It's probably good morning where most of you are joining us from. We'll start very shortly, but we're just going to take a few moments to let everybody join the webinar. So as I say, good afternoon from London, good morning, maybe good afternoon where you're joining us from. Welcome to our webinar today, which is all about making innovation and experimentation happen in government. How can you facilitate those spaces? So from innovation labs to incubator units, creating space and systems for experimentation in government. I'm Siobhan Bonita. I'm a former UK civil servant and I'm delighted to be chairing this webinar on behalf of Global Government Forum. We're an organisation that works with civil servants all around the world, and I'd really like to thank Livio, who are our knowledge partner for our webinar today. So, in terms of the topic today, innovation in government doesn't just happen by accident. It really does require a lot of time, space, leadership support, and the ability to test new approaches before scaling up what works. So, today we're going to be exploring how governments are building that capability to experiment and crucially how they can move beyond kind of testing and pilots to embedding successful ideas into mainstream delivery. We have four fantastic speakers with us here today, and in a moment I'm going to introduce our panel. But I do want to say to you, our audience, that we are going to make this as interactive a discussion as we possibly can. So whichever device you are using, you should see somewhere on your screen a Q&A button, probably at the bottom of your screen. Please use that Q&A button to message in any questions that you have or any comments that you have right from the start of the webinar. Don't wait until the end. We will have time at the end for questions, but if one of our speakers is saying something and you want to comment or you want to come in, please message your questions in and we'll get through as many of those as we can before the end of our conversation today. So, in terms of our great panel who we have with us here today, we have two Ericas actually. The first of our Erica, we've got Erica Kirsten Easton, who is the Chief Data Officer and Director General at Transport Canada. Erica Kirsten and her team are responsible for data asset management and governance, improvement of digital service delivery, and IT enterprise architecture and security assessments for the department. In addition, and in close collaboration with the National Supply Chain Office, Erica Kirsten is leading efforts to improve the use of data and digitalisation to strengthen the logistics aspects of the Canadian government's supply chain. She has extensive experience in policy, communication, service and data with the private sector and with the Federal Public Service, including 12 years as an executive in government. And then we will hear from Erica Wren, who is the Chief Data Officer for Shared Services Canada. Erica has over 20 years of experience in IT transformation, data strategy, digital service delivery, and public sector modernisation. And in her current role, she leads enterprise data analytics and information management programs. She was previously Chief Data Officer at Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, and before that was Director General of Modernisation at Canadian Heritage, driving there the digital transformation of grants and contributions programs, and that included the rapid deployment of emergency COVID-19 funding platforms. Erica has also held executive roles at the Canada Border Service Agency and Correctional Service Canada, where she led national digital transformation and data analytics initiatives. And then we head over to New Brunswick, where I'm delighted that we have Valerie Kelly, who is Director of Innovation and Transformation there, where Valerie, she drives client-centered digital transformation in social development with a strong focus on improving outcomes through inclusive, human-centered design, partnering closely with clients and frontline teams to translate complex challenges into practical digital solutions. She leads change that is sustainable, ethical, impactful, and ensures that technology meaningfully improves the lives of the communities that it serves. Valerie has been applying digital innovation in the public sector for over 30 years and has been recognised on more than one occasion as one of the top 50 global public sector innovators. And then last but by no means least, I'm delighted that we have Stephen Karam, who is Public Sector Transformation Leader and Partner for Canadian Public Sector at Levio, our knowledge partner. And he works with governments across Canada to design, test and scale new approaches to service delivery. Also, with more than 30 years' experience supporting all three levels of government, Stephen helps departments to create the conditions for innovation to move beyond pilots and into sustained change. He's led major digital and operating model transformations across more than 40 federal departments and agencies, combining human-centered design, multidisciplinary teaming, and pragmatic governance to deliver measurable outcomes. And his work really focuses on what we're talking about today, so creating those safe spaces for experimentation. So I'm sure you will agree with me. We have a really stellar panel with us here today. As I say, please do take this opportunity to message in your questions. I don't want you leaving the webinar thinking, I wish I'd asked that question. So we really welcome your questions and your comments. But I'm going to kick off our discussion today. I've got a kind of opening question for all of our panelists. And Erica Kirsten, I'll come to you first. So we did say on the website when we were kind of marketing this webinar that we want to give some real life examples of how experimentation and innovation happens in government. So to all of you, I'm going to be asking, can you give us one or two examples where you have been involved in a kind of pilot program or where you've helped to facilitate innovation or experimentation in some way, and tell us a little bit about what the process was and what the outcome was.
So much interesting stuff happening within the government right now. Certainly with the importance placed on AI, I think there are some really great examples of things that are happening in that space. But they require some foundational work to be happening as part of that. And so I'll focus on that a little bit. I think innovation obviously important. It's something that we need to do to deliver things for Canadians, for Canadian industry. And innovation can really be sexy, right? But it also needs to be practical. And the reason I say that is it's really easy to get enamored with the bright and shiny, but innovation needs some planning and it needs some thinking for it to be sustainable. It needs collaboration, and it needs a space to really do that reimagining of the problems that you're trying to solve and the approaches and what ultimately you're trying to do to serve those we are here to serve, being industry and citizens. So I really like the book, and I'll get into an example that we have here at Transport Canada, one of many, but I really love the book Think Slow, Act Fast, if you're familiar with that one, how big things get done. And it really talks about that planning process, really important before you start getting into that, because it's part of the innovation process. It doesn't have to, everything have to be really quick. So an example here at Transport Canada is work that we've been doing on improving the client experience when it comes to contact centers, virtual assistant, chatbot type of thing. So we have those types of services, like hundreds of phone numbers to reach different parts of Transport Canada. Some integrated contact centers, call centers that people can reach, but a lot of times it's reaching experts in civil aviation and whatnot for different regulatory requirements and questions that people may have. So you have a lot of people as part of other roles picking up a phone call from those people in industry that need answers to certain things, but it's not a common approach to things. It's very fragmented, no real technological backbone to it, but not even a real process to it. So for us, it was a matter of mapping things out so that we could better plan and then innovate with some technology to support all of this work and look at automation and other things like that. So first and foremost, it was about bringing in the expertise from the business area, bringing in tech experts, so enterprise architecture, data management people, information management, service designers right from the beginning, and using governance to manage that process and make sure that we had a structure and we had everything well defined in terms of what we were trying to do collectively, but then giving everybody the room to contribute their expertise. Used an agile, and we're using an agile approach, so it is iterative. It is not a free for all. and defining the problem together, mapping out what is the client experience. And literally, it was about calling each phone number, like basic stuff, right? It's not, when you think innovation, it's not, but it's figuring out what that experience is, then looking at what common capabilities could be leveraged so that, again, that experience could be made a little bit more uniform. And then finding a common approach, testing it with users. So, first off, those who are answering the phones here at Transport Canada, and then those who are using the services, and seeing what they need and what they want and what they would entertain in terms of ideas that we could experiment with them. And then, of course, working for those of you who know the Canadian federal government, we have a department that my colleague here is now with, Shared Services Canada, who provide a lot of the common platforms that we can use for contact centers. So it's looking at the business requirements, going to our partners at Shared Services Canada to look at technologies available that we could leverage. So it's not just within our department, but looking to innovate with our
Yeah.
partners as well. And then there were some services that were identified that don't fit with the technologies that are currently offered. So it's, rather than trying to wedge it, it's trying to look at what else can we do. Looking at automation of some of the processes that we currently have. They're very people and resource intensive right now. So how can we map the technology solutions in the contact centers and on the virtual assistants to meet client needs? And then as a result, we are now starting to look at, with that mapping done, how can we use agentic AI to leverage the services that we are offering? So that's been a little
Yeah.
bit of the trajectory, or just one
Yeah.
example here at Transport.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Erica Kirsten. A really great place for us to start because I like what you said with the kind of at the beginning, innovation can be sexy, but it also needs to be practical. So it's not something you can necessarily just rush into. You have to have, as you said, a proper structure, clear processes, defining the problem so that everybody knows what it is they're working on, bringing in the right people to do this. And as you say out there, mapping out and figuring out what the current customer experience is like, how you need to improve it, and then having that ability to test those different approaches, collaborating with other partners on some of the solutions. And then right at the end, you brought us up to, I'm sure there'll be questions about this, which types of technology, and the technology is always changing and evolving. So as you say, now moving maybe to agentic AI is the thing that a lot of people are talking about now. So a really good place for us to start. I'm sure there's already food for thought there in terms of our audience. Thank you so much. And then Erica, I'm going to ask you the same question. So do you have one or two examples of things from Shared Services Canada where you've actually created kind of these spaces for innovation, and how has that played out?
Yeah, certainly. Share Services Canada, we actually have a couple things. We have a team that focuses on digital innovation. So all they do is to work with Canadian technology organizations and academia and figure out what are the most Canadian and sovereign technologies we can bring into our consumption for the use for the rest of government Canada. So we sort of implemented that innovation institutionally, if you will. We have a dedicated team with a clear focus, with guardrail, with funding for that. One example I'll give is I think it was a couple years ago. There is a Canadian company that focuses on using GPS for rescue missions in remote areas where there is basically no signals available. So imagine if you were to rescue a team of hikers, there's no signal, you couldn't find them. This device allows the rescue teams to be able to connect to through satellite service to be able to communicate with what's needed to rescue that team. And we use it for various business objectives. We use it to repair equipment that's in the remote area. It's been looked at by Canadian Coast Guard as well. And it started with a startup company setting up a call with our innovations team here at Shared Services Canada. So we don't just say, hey, let's do that on the side of your desk. We actually institutionalized, we formalized that kind of role within Shared Services. And, I think folks here from Government of Canada all know CanChat, right? So CanChat has been deployed as the uh, official Government of Canada chatbot tool that is 100% sovereign, that is owned by Canadian infrastructure. It's managed within Share Service Canada. Again, that is an innovation. That's an idea somebody in Share Services had. Now expanding to the rest of Government Canada. We're deploying to thousands of users as we speak. So I think one thing about innovation is totally agree with Erica's point around being practical. Like being practical means give people the support, the room and the support and the funding and the resources to do that. If you expect innovation to consistently happen on people's side of people's desks, you're not fundamentally creating a culture, or you're not really making that something that's sustainable, right? So I think as leaders, we need to say, yes, we need to be innovative, but follow up with actions. And I think this is what Share Services has done really, really well. It also, I think this is something in terms of what makes it work, not related to my experience at Share Services Canada, but when I was in charge of correctional services, IT services in the regions, providing infrastructure and equipment to all of the federal institutions for inmates. One of my staff thought of the idea of something called video visitation. So, when family goes in to visit inmates, the only way to do that is actually come in and sign a piece of paper and meet with the inmate in person. So this is not practical for a lot of inmates whose families are very far away. And during the pandemic, it was actually became like impossible. So when our staff came up with that idea, we started the testing with one institution, and gradually, it actually happened a year before the pandemic, we were able to go back and change the policy to allow for digital innovation. To actually happen. It became a norm during the pandemic. That was the only way inmates could be in contact with their families. So the reason I'm giving that example is we also need to be able to change the policy, the legislation, the guardrails around the outcomes that are proven to be beneficial and positive because of the results of innovation. We have to celebrate the wins, but we also have to make changes in our system so we can have more wins in the future.
Brilliant. Erica, thank you. Thank you so much. And that leads on really nicely from what Erica Kirsten was saying. You also saying innovation won't just happen. You have to show the leadership. You have to turn what you're saying into real actions. You have to create that room, the support and the funding and the space. I love the ideas, the examples you gave there of the team that you have set up, that a company, a small startup from the private sector could call that team and get their idea, the GPS solution, actually listened to and rolled out. So I think having that culture of welcoming ideas, really, really important. And then another issue you've brought in, which we'll definitely come on to in my later questions and in the conversation with the audience, I think is how do you actually make sure that you get that feedback loop back into the policy process? And as you say, not just celebrate the wins, but if you need to change something, then to make sure this innovation is embedded, you have to be flexible and agile enough to be able to make those changes so that real sustainable change can happen on the ground. Thanks so much, Erica. Again, great start there in terms of helping us to set the scene. Valerie, I'm really curious now in New Brunswick. So obviously from the more a kind of slightly different perspective, not from the federal perspective, but how are things in New Brunswick? Do you have examples where you've kind of facilitated experimentation in a similar way?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I'll offer some context so you can see what we're doing here. A few years ago, when we started our transformation journey, we recognized that most of the work that we do here at social development is intertwined and connected with the work that our colleagues at the Department of Health is doing. And most of the services that our citizens receive, at least from social development, aren't delivered by government, but they're delivered by partners in the community. Mm-hmm. And so together we worked collaboratively a few years ago to establish a vision, a North Star that we'd all work towards, could we design a model where our colleagues across GNB, across programs, and with partners in the community and clients themselves, build a model where we're working collaboratively online in the care of our clients. So integrated care for clients, partners, across GNB departments, and across program areas. And so that's the vision that we've been working towards. So all of our innovation has been with that in mind, like trying to achieve that vision. And so I'll give you a couple of examples of where we've built pieces and components that are helping us move forward in an innovative way. So as I mentioned, social development in particular works closely with community partners that deliver services to citizens on our behalf. And so we have a number of legacy systems, many manual processes still in place, right? And so we've been trying to, with very manual processes, still faxes, phones, emails. It's difficult for our staff to secure the right services from the right partners at the right time when the clients need it. And so a lot of administrative burden in the day-to-day processes. But our partners were also frustrated because they weren't getting the information they needed to quickly deliver the services that our citizens need. And so ultimately what was happening there, it was causing delays in any of our clients getting services that they needed. So we partner with some home care agencies, with some frontline staff, and we co-designed what ended up to be a digital portal where we're now sharing and collaborating with partners digitally online. So social development shares basic client information, including services that clients need. And our partners can now, through the partner portal, confirm that they can deliver the services, they confirm that they have delivered the services, but more importantly, they tell us how well the clients are doing, if they've had falls, if they have behavior changes that we need to know about, and then that alerts our social development team so that they can take action, maybe visit the client, do another assessment, things like that. So we started small in one area of the province. We used clients and we used partners in the community to help us co-design. We had a feedback loop so that we could continue to learn as we went and introduce improvements throughout the process. And we measured to see, are we getting what we hoped for out of there? Are we becoming more efficient? Are the clients getting the services that they need more quickly? Our staff following more efficient processes and our partners doing the same. And both our staff and our partners confirm that it saved them a lot of time, very valuable time that they can now invest back into caring for our citizens. So with that information in hand, we began to scale the solution, and now it's distributed across half the province.
Wow.
The second example I'll provide is about using AI to solve problems. So as we're modernizing not just our client service delivery model, we're modernizing our technology footprint, and it's growing our user base exponentially as we onboard partners and clients. So we're moving from about 1,500 users to support to possibly many thousands. And so we explore using AI as a way to augment our support teams. So we used our training guides and our user manuals and our knowledge base of information to get started. And we piloted the approach first with our user support team, but with staff across that are using the system as well. And so they now each have an assistant that can help them navigate the new system and navigate the business rules that we've redesigned in the new service delivery model. So the feedback so far has been really positive, and we're about to scale that across the province right now.
Fantastic, Valerie. Thank you so much. Really good to have those two very concrete examples. And again, you've added, I think, to some of the things that Erica said in their opening things. You've said the importance of collaboration across different levels, the importance of kind of co-designing innovation with frontline partners and others. As well, you said there's some of the key things: start small, have those feedback loops in place, but also be measuring the impacts as you go along so that you can see if you're actually having the impact that you want, and then scale up. And then I really like that you've brought it on to AI. I think that loops back to what Erica Kirsten was saying in the beginning, how you can use AI to augment your team. So not replace them, but help them as this demand and kind of client and citizen expectations grow. How can you bring in technology to help support your human workforce to do the jobs that they're doing, and having kind of AI assistance as well? And we talked about agentic AI as well earlier. Thanks so much, Valerie. Some really good examples there from New Brunswick. So, Stephen, you've been listening to our three kind of government panelists there, and you work with so many organizations across the public sector. Does this resonate with you, what they're saying, and what have you experienced in terms of kind of the facilitation of innovation across the public sector in Canada?
Yeah, thanks, Siobhan. And kudos for choosing such a great, a set of panelists, because I've been listening very intently on to the stories of each of you, and it's been inspiring, because I always look at innovation as almost a master class in storytelling, because you have to be able to understand what story do you actually want to tell through the innovation, right? Because that's how you connect with people. And if we're using a human-centered approach, you want to be able to connect with people through that storytelling. And so in order to tell the story, you actually have to embrace and fall in love with the problem space. And I find that too many times what we do is we get into the room and everybody's racing toward the solution. And we start solutioning really, really quickly. And we're saying, we know what the solution is. The problem is the absence of the solution. How many times have I been in a conversation where somebody says, well, we need a CRM, like a client relationship management tool. Why? Because we don't have one. Oh, but that's not the problem. There's another problem, right? And so innovation is really supposed to explore that problem space that allows us to have that impact at the human level that is measurable, right? And Valerie talked about the measures. And so as we're moving through that, the innovation, I think innovation hubs and labs have had to mature over the past decade, because it was really starting out to be like, let's find a place where we can move fast and we can iterate. And this is where everybody got into agile, everybody got into their sprints, and a lot of people were doing it well. Fast forward, and if you look back in time, there are some experiments that worked really, really well, but there are way more that are part of a graveyard of great ideas, right? That ended up working well, but nobody was there to catch them at the end, because we didn't know what to do with them, because we didn't tell the story to ourselves of what the change needed to be. And therefore, we didn't convince somebody like a business owner to say, I need to own this story and I'll take the story from here. Right. And that's really, really important in that storytelling journey of innovation, is what we're doing. Because I hear everybody talking about AI, which is great, because that's the hot topic, right? How are we going to use AI? How are we going to get our chatbots? Erica, Kirsten, you talked about agentic AI. So we're doing a lot of that experimentation, but we always we want to pull people back, because we want to talk about the story of AI. And I remember this conversation when we had hosted at our office about 10 years ago when we were talking about digital government. We had like probably 80% of the CIOs in government. And one of the CIOs in our office said, like, when we were talking about a digital strategy, he said, well, where's our electricity strategy? And everybody kind of laughed, but was like, well, what are you getting at? It's like, well, nobody ever told us how to use electricity, and we use it every day, and it actually helps us do everything we do as a business, as an organization. And he said, digital should be the same thing, right? I always remember that, because in these conversations that we're having today about AI, how do we use AI to do this? It's like, well, hang on a second. What do we need to change? How are we changing the way we work, right? By virtue of the opportunity that AI brings, right? So when you reframe the question in an innovation context, you actually are able to bring, as Erica, Kirsten, and Erica mentioned, that multidisciplinary view into the into the room, and you start focusing on positive disruption. Right? Because what we end up seeing a lot of times is sometimes people say, well, I want to build a proof of concept. Well, I got news for you. Spoiler alert, the technology is likely going to work. Right? And I've never been in a position where the technology completely fails unless it's a failed implementation. But the technology itself is normally going to work. AI works. But you have to know how to make it work within the context. And so that's why it's important to understand what the disruption is. And Erica talked about it at Shared Services, like, if we need to change a policy, that's awesome, because you can't just change a policy by saying the policy needs to be changed. You have to prove that there's an impact if you change the policy. right? And that's a positive disruption. And so that's where we have to look at that and say, so what needs to change if we want to make this impact? And that's part of the story. And I think that's where it's important from an innovation perspective to look at it as human-centered, fall in love with the problem, be able to build the story, and bring people into the problem space. Because I found that to be a real game changer. I'm working on something now, and there was this tension, right? Which is, and I'm sure everybody knows what that tension is when you have the person waiting for the thing. I need the thing at the end, and I need it by the end of the month. And you're trying to figure out how to give them the thing. And it's like, well, we got, and you watch the tension build in the teams as they're racing to try and figure out how to deliver a thing against a completely false deadline, right? These are made up deadlines that we're trying to meet. And like again, I've had over 30 years of experience in this space in government. And there are only like a handful I could think of that were real deadlines. Like real deadlines or people lose their lives, right? Like that's those are when the deadlines matter, right? But when like, that's not happening, we're kind of placing them falsely. But what we do is we try and say, well, who's asking? Let's bring them into the problem space, right? And that's where you start bringing when you start bringing people into the problem space, and they start to becoming the co-designers. You're actually starting to build mind share, and that mind share is so important to be able to get that change management built into your process right from the beginning, and that helps the adaptation. And there's a concept of adapt to adopt, which is you have to allow people to embrace the change, which is the adapt, so that they can actually start to change their behavior that the technology is supporting, which is the adopt. Right? And I heard Valerie talk about more and more users coming on board because they want to. Well, that's not by accident, right? That's a good process that people are seeing themselves in the change. They want to be part of the change. So innovation has its place. It's just the reframing of the storytelling around the problem it's solving, the ways of working that are changing, and then how innovation supports. And I think that's really, really true today with AI, especially.
Brilliant. Thanks, Stephen. I really like the way you put there about innovation and storytelling. And so often, I think in events that we do, we see this, that people rush to the solution when they haven't defined or actually thought through what the problem is. I think that goes back to something that you were saying, Erica, as well. I also like what you said about, because this is very familiar to me, because we used to talk about incubator units, innovation hubs quite a lot. But as you're saying, even though some of those were very successful, what happened at the end? What happened with that great idea? And I think we're going to be coming on to that now. Who owned that, and whose job was it to make that change happen that you're all talking about? As well. You picking up on some of the things that we've heard from our other speakers, the importance of co-designing, of having those multidisciplinary views in the room as well. And I like the way that you said, when it comes to proof of concept, it's probably not the tech that's going to be the problem. It's probably that broader sense of what is the problem here as well. Great way for us to start. Thank you so much to all of you. Just to the audience, do start getting your questions in. I'm going to throw one more question at all of our speakers before we come over to the audience. But I said I would change the order, but Erica, Kirsten, I know you've been waiting for quite a long time, so I'm going to come back to you first on this one. I think in those opening remarks, you have all quite nicely set out what some of the conditions you needed to have in place to make this innovation kind of successful. But the flip side of that, I'm going to ask, what are the biggest barriers, do you think, to innovation? And I think for the people in the maybe who are listening to this conversation, some of them might be thinking this all sounds good in theory, but in practice it doesn't work like this, on the ground. So what would you say are some of the biggest challenges and the biggest barriers when it comes to facilitating this type of innovative culture?
I think we're starting to hear some common themes here already in what my colleagues and myself have been discussing. I will say first and foremost, what comes to mind is what Stephen talked about, which is solutioning too early, and solutioning to technology right away will stymie innovation. And you really need to give the time to think through what that problem is, and not just the problem that you're trying to solve in the immediate, but also where there might be linked areas that could benefit from some of your thinking with the technologies that you will eventually put in place. Sometimes you scope the technology needs too quickly because people want to deliver something quickly, and then later on you see that we have tech debt instead. And I think we're all experiencing that now. So I think we have an opportunity there in how we innovate. I mean, ultimately, government innovation is about delivering. We have a certain accountability and responsibility in government to focus on not just that initial delivery, but that long-term societal impact rather than that short-term gain. So we need to keep that in mind. Obviously, involving multiple stakeholders and users, really important. And not just that, but the partners that we don't always involve in terms of your legal folks, the political environment, thinking through that way, all of the policy with the technology, with the business users, and then obviously looking at what budgets allow and scoping in that way. So it's innovation in how we do the service delivery, how we think through the policy and the regulatory contexts as well. It all kind of goes hand in hand along with the technology and whatnot. So with the plans in place, and then with that delivery mindset, it's still important to have incremental wins so that you can still bring people along, because you can't say, yeah, I'll get you something in 5 years, right? Like political cycles in which we operate are not like that. So what wins can we put in place towards our end goal so that we can tell the story, like Stephen mentioned? That storytelling is really important to show that we're working towards something. I think what's also really critical in that innovation space is investing in skills and development, and in some cases, just literacy, so that you have everybody understanding what you're trying to do, and you can have more informed discussions. I think part of investing in that is offering that opportunity for experimentation. So whether it be opening up technology sandboxes for those in the technological space, hackathons. And we've had some really successful hackathons here at Transport Canada where mostly people within the IT space are participating, but we have business owners who are coming in and participating as well. And it's come up with some really, really great outcomes in that space. So I think those are really great ways to bring innovation into an organization and move the organization into that free thinking space. Yeah.
Thanks, Erica Gerson. So some of the challenges that you mentioned there, sort of maybe the political environment, some of the technical restraints, the realities with which you're operating, funding, budgets, the regulatory context, all of those challenges that I think public servants will be familiar with. But as you're saying, some things you can do, they're making sure you have those incremental wins along the way, really, really important to show that you're making progress. Investing in skills and development, I think talk about the people side of things, really important. And then creating those very practical spaces, the kind of sandboxes and hackathons can really help. Erica, I will come to you because you mentioned a couple of things which I want to pick up on, maybe some of those political issues, maybe with a small p. So you mentioned, for example, I think you mentioned about the kind of sovereign issue at the moment, which is very topical, I think. And one of the things that we've had come up in previous conversations that we've had is with that increased focus on making sure that you have kind of, data sovereignty, AI sovereignty, that you are looking to have Canadian kind of input in all of this. Is that itself going to become a barrier to innovation, do you think? Does that kind of stifle where people can look to for partners working on some of these issues?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think it's going to become a barrier necessarily. If anything, that's going to become a catalyst and motivator for people to think outside of the box. We have been trained for many, many decades to think about the big vendors, the big tech. the Amazons and the Microsoft, and all of a sudden we are diverse. Well, there is a diversification strategy happening within the government of Canada that looking to invest more Canadian technology, Canadian infrastructure, Canadian talent. That is real and it is happening. So in a way, it kind of pushed us to change not only our thinking, but our procurement strategies. You will see some policies coming in the coming days in terms of promoting that by in Canada, promote Canadian Canadian technology and Canadian talent. It's also pushing us to change how we traditionally engage with private industries, right? Like if there are folks who are working in private industries, there is a very structured process. We send out RFI or RFP. We have a very structured process and takes weeks and sometimes months to engage. And now we are going at an accelerated speed to expand the Canadian footprint in our technology, in our infrastructure. So we have to change how we do things. So in a way, it's forcing the system to change itself for that ultimate inevitable outcome, which is we have to be a sovereign nation. In order to do so, we have to invest in ourselves first. I actually think the future is very bright for Canadian innovators and technology companies, and talents.
If anyone else wants to come on that issue of sovereignty, it's just that you mentioned it in your opening remarks. I wanted to pick you up on it. Then please do come in at any point. But Erica, I also wanted to ask your thoughts, and I'm going to ask Valerie and then Stephen this as well. You mentioned the fact that a company can ring your innovation kind of team and put forward an idea, and you gave us an example of where that idea had been taken forward. Do you think that officials across Shared Services Canada or across other departments would feel the same way? Do you think people feel like they can put forward their ideas, that their kind of managers would listen if they have ideas, and that there would be a process where they could then maybe see those ideas being tested? I'm come back to you, Erica, on that one, and then I'm going to ask Valerie and Stephen. But Erica, you're on mute at the moment.
No, sorry about that.
That's okay.
I certainly hope so, but I know our system. We have, at Shared Services, for example, we have almost 10,000 employees. It's a large organization with a lot of cultural behaviors embedded within. It's not easy to change. I certainly hope so. I think under our president's leadership, Scott Jones, we've created that really open culture for people to test out ideas. I'll give you an example. We have an innovation fund every year that we welcome ideas from staff to come in. It doesn't it doesn't matter if it fails. I personally don't think we celebrate failures enough because celebrating failures is the way to really encourage that kind of culture. And again, I turn to my colleagues, the folks online. If you're in a managerial role, like it starts with you, right? So it's we are against different cultures coming in. We're against a lot of government red tapes and processes. So it's really up to you to eliminate the 2 meetings that you don't really need. Eliminate the briefing note. That's not where innovation incubates. It doesn't grow out of briefing notes and meetings and committees, right? It's stemming from action and passion. So let's all nurture that space for our staff.
Thanks, Erica. So Valerie and then Stephen, I'm going to put those 2 questions to you. So one, what do you see as getting in the way of innovation from your experience? So what are kind of the barriers? I'll start with that actually. So Valerie, I'm going to come to you.
Yeah, so, if you were I think we have, I can give you 3 examples of where we've seen some barriers that we've had to overcome. The first is, I would say, it's our inability to smoothly step out of our silos and work as a team, share information, and learn to trust each other over time. Yeah. Working collaboratively across programs within our department, but across departments as well. Eric and I were talking about that a little bit earlier before the session started. It's letting go of control and instead aligning all of our work to the outcomes that would produce better citizen experiences. And the second, I think, barrier that we've been able to overcome is we can't innovate as well if we only work from within government, right? Because our view is narrow and it's sometimes biased. Innovation that we've led so far sparks and it spreads more widely when we've included partners with creative talents outside of government, when we put citizens at the center and included them so that they're co-designing and co-creating experiences with us. And that approach has given us the ability to leverage each other's diverse skills and talents. And the third is our rules, right? Legislative. We were talking about that earlier, Stephen. Legislative, regulatory, privacy, security. I could go on and on. And when we start with rules-based thinking, we can easily think of all of the reasons why we can't bring innovative change about. So we need to have that open space to innovate that will transform and modernize the rules, because the rules right now are getting in our way.
Thanks. That's really practical. So step outside the silos, get in those creative partners, make sure you co-design with your citizens, and then modernize the rules where you need to change things to allow change to happen. Stephen, a lot of the issues there, I mean, you already picked up on some of the challenges in your opening remarks, but again, from your experience of working with so many different public bodies, what do you see as being the biggest barriers to innovation?
There's kind of, it's been great to listen to this because, Erica Kirsten it was, I liked how her flow was because it started with one and she started to articulate. And at the end of the day, it's like, well, it's only everything, right? That is a barrier, right? And Valerie, the same thing. Like you're kind of like there's all these things and it's right? But the problem with was as innovators, sometimes we see all of these barriers as adversaries, right? Oh, we can't do it because of policy. We can't do it because of procurement. We can't do it because of regulations. And they're not adversaries. They're actually just dance partners, right? We just don't know the choreography. And so part of it is you have to invest yourself in understanding the choreography of working within this very complex dance number. And so when you actually understand how policy thinks, and the only way you're going to understand how policy thinks is by bringing them into the room. If you understand how legislation works, you bring legal into the room, right? And that's how you actually start to understand the choreography because you understand their language, you understand their lenses, right? And you understand their taxonomy, right? And then you build then a common language. And I think that's a really, really important part because I've been in innovation sessions so many times where we've tried to make big changes. And you've got somebody from a program side saying, we can't do that because of policy. Yet, the moment of truth happened when policy's there and looks at the person from the program and said, actually, that's not true. It's your interpretation of the policy that's actually stopping you from doing it. And it was like, bam, right? Like right away, barrier gone, because now we're starting to talk about a common language. And that's the basis of architecture, right? And that's, again, the thing we're trying to get away from is just engineering solutions, and we have to architect change. And to architect change, it all starts with a common vocabulary. And so that's why when you get the people in the room, they're seemingly speaking different languages, right? I speak policy, I speak legal, I speak regulatory. And it's like, okay, well, let's get that lexicon, that kind of common view of what we're trying to do, and that's really important. So when I talk about the barriers include, like I say, our interpretation that everybody's against innovation, and they're not. I think there's a true kind of we want to have innovation. Yes, you have to deal with fixed mindset versus growth mindset, but you can actually bring that. There are techniques to bring people outside of their fixed mindset of like we can't do that because to here's how we can do that, right? And like I say, those are more facilitation techniques that we use to kind of get people like into that growth mindset. Then you can start clearing pathways for innovation. The other part is again looking at well, another part I would say would be procurement, right? Like, so you like I get to say that because I've been working with government for over 3 decades, and procurement has always been an issue. And even today, when we talk about innovation, it's like we all want to do it. Internally, there's kind of policy constraints around gating, et cetera, and governance. But then externally, one of the core issues is, well, we want you to be innovative, but we want you to tell us what we're going to get over 5 years, right? And it's like, I can't tell you that because we're being innovative. Well, that's great, but in order to get this innovation contract, you have to tell us what we're going to get, which means you need to know the solution before you understand the problem. And this is one of the biggest juxtapositions that we have in the public sector because we're dealing with public funds, we're in a Westminster model.
Mhm.
We have to do this because we're publicly accountable. Great, but you can be publicly accountable in an ecosystem of uncertainty with the right controls. And that's one thing, again, back to the choreography, understanding what those controls are, understanding how to build trust within that ecosystem so that you're trying to help each other all be successful by playing your parts and in that in like on the game board, right? So that's one of the issues is we don't have enough understanding of what the choreography is and how to actually work that because it's hard. It actually is just hard. So we try to avoid that hard stuff by creating hubs and labs because it insulates ourselves from all the hard stuff that we have to do on the outside. If we actually do it inside the ecosystem in which we work, the operational ecosystem, we can actually make some really great change, but it's one bit at a time. It's like kind of the Kaizen model, which is, incremental, like let's do 1% better every day. And the compounding effects of those changes are really going to be seen over time. Because that's where I've seen the best things, the best results is not by big bang, right? It's by people really embracing themselves in the choreography.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Stephen. It's really interesting because I think, Erica, you said we don't celebrate failure enough, but Stephen, you're saying there, I think what you raised, the issue of public money and spending, I think people are nervous, aren't they, about, doing something that they're not going to get results because they know it's public money. So I think there's a real tension there. And we've got a question coming from Sarah Ray, which I think leads on from that a little bit. We often hear about the importance of psychological safety to enable innovation and new ideas. Have you seen any good examples of fostering this? So that's a great question from Sarah. And she's got a second question, which was I was going to come on to scaling, to scale pilots. Can you give any examples of defining success metrics? I tell you what, Valerie, I'm going to come back to you on the one of scaling because you said that you started small and then scaled out. So any thoughts on Sarah's question, or broader than that, how do you do that scaling? Do you have to kind of go through that process of innovation with everybody again each time you want to scale it to a different area, or how do you actually do that kind of scaling process?
Sorry, I was on mute. So no, after we run our first pilot, we at that time have the measures of, did we accomplish in this pilot what we set out to do? So it depends on what the problem is that we're solving with any particular pilot, right? A lot of our work right now centers around ease of use, faster service delivery, more efficient processes. It's not about reduction of money for us. It's about better experiences for citizens, getting services in the hands of our citizens more quickly and the right services. So our metrics might change depending on what initiative we're running at any given point in time. But when we've proven that that pilot is viable, like that we've seen that it's added value, then at that point in time, we socialize that immediately across our group of directors to help them understand. So our directors here, they're responsible for bringing business change about, operational change about. So we socialize that, we celebrate that, we help our leadership team know the impact of that change. And as long as it doesn't require significant funding, significant HR changes, significant policy or legislative changes, we're good to go because it's expected that we're to innovate and to achieve the vision that we'd hoped for. So at that point in time, we collaborate with our group of directors and we determine how might we scale from there. Is it across the province or is it another location? And do we just keep adding on? But in any case, we continue to learn as we go. We continue to put improvements in place through the feedback loops that we've established, and we measure as we go. Because what we find when we don't do a big bang change everything is that sometimes there are areas across the province that work a little bit differently. And so as we move across the province, they inform more improvements, a better outcome, because they have different ideas and different feedback that we're adding into the overall solution. So it actually continues to make a better product at the end for us.
Thanks,
Does that
Valerie.
answer your
Yeah,
question?
that's really helpful. And I'm going to ask a similar thing. Erica Kirsten, you said, rolling out your you're kind of testing on contact centers, a different approach in contact centers. Again, scaling up, was it similar to how Valerie does it, or do you have to kind of go through the process again as you move to different contact centers?
So I'm trying to find the unmute button. Yeah, I think setting out what we were trying to do, setting out the outcomes from the beginning, and the KPIs that we were going to use to measure, really important to being able to scale up. Defining ultimately what we want the service experience to be, as foundational, then helps drive, okay, then we start to look at the actual services that are being offered, who is being offered to and whatnot, and then being able to scale to other areas. So yeah, just having that foundational thinking from the beginning, and then obviously being able to experiment, do that continual feedback loop. Really important to be able to continue to, even if it's informally, evaluate and make necessary changes, I think is really important. And admitting, hey, this isn't working. We
Mm,
need to go back and a couple of steps, redefine, and then move forward from there. Really important without seeing it as an abject failure and just giving people the chance to
yeah,
rethink
yeah.
continually. Really
Thanks,
important.
Eric.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Erica. And I mean, on that kind of leads on to Sarah's other question, which was about the importance of psychological safety. And Stephen, you've sent a written answer here saying, yeah, this starts with leadership behavior, so not necessarily with policy, creating separate spaces, like separating experimentation from performance evaluation. Don't use phrases like a post-mortem, use more like a learning review kind of language as well. So all of those things. So Erica Wren, I'm going to say, because that led on a little bit from the question I asked you about, do people feel like they can put forward their ideas? Do people feel like they can fail, or are they still, is there still a fear of failure, do you think, in some parts of the department or a wider government?
Um, so I think in terms of safety, people maybe sometimes equate saying yes to everything to safety, where I think it's a bit of a both. It's being able to tell people, yes, you can do this, and also be clear about what you cannot do. I think
Mm,
it's the no's in a way creates a sense of safety for folks to know I can fail up to this. So there's some things I create in my team in terms of guardrails. I'm like, don't do anything that's gonna obviously let us in jail. Do not compromise on safety and the privacy and the security of our data. Do not compromise on legislative uh, obligations and compliance. Do not compromise on XYZ. You have to be
mm,
really clear about the guardrails in addition to say, yes, you can do this.
right.
Whether that means a budgetary constraints, legislative, a policy, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to tell people what they can and cannot do. I also think that we need to normalize like the failures in a way that did it work. We kind of reward outputs, right? Outputs are a bigger, it's
Mm,
one of many things you want innovation to achieve as an outcome. So outcomes, some things are intangible, like did you create a testing kind of culture? So that's why I say celebrate the failures, as in if we only look at this is successful because you've built X, X is successful, then you're kind of overlooking the bigger intent of innovation and experimentation. So
yeah,
normalize answers like, no, I did not succeed. No, I don't know if it's going to work. And then, okay, let's talk about how do we do this? And
yeah.
normalize, we tried 10 times, this is what we learned, is absolutely crucial and important for people to feel safe so they can talk about what didn't work.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. Cameron sent in the question, which is, where have you seen governments effectively build long-term capacity, not just one-off initiatives for experimentation? I really like this question. So, do you think you've experienced working in organizations where you've created an innovative culture. So it's not just a one-off project that succeeded, you've actually changed the culture to be a culture that facilitates innovation. Stephen, I'll give you a chance to answer in a moment because you've sent in a written answer, but not everyone might have seen that. But Valerie, I'm going to come to you. Have you got any examples where you think you've managed to change the culture, not just deliver one successful kind of pilot program?
I don't think we've changed the culture broadly, but I think we've changed it in pockets through a number of um, initiatives or projects. And so, I think that when I think of, our home care agencies in a part of the province, right, that the very first group that we brought to the table to help us co-design what sharing information and integrated care could look like from their perspective, um, they don't think of another way now, right? They pick up the phone and they call us and they talk about a problem that they're having and they ask if we can work with them to help fix that problem, right? When I think about, certain pockets of staff within the organization that we've worked closely with, like our children and youth group, where, we've improved the number of applicants of foster and adoption that can now be connected to a child in need, right? We've quadrupled the number of people that we can match with in our first month alone when we released our first innovation pilot. That experience changed their thinking, right? And so I think that changing and achieving a full culture around innovation is over time. We need to think about it as a journey, but it's only those successes that are really going to secure the change champions throughout the organization and the belief that it's possible, right?
Which means it's really important, isn't it, to communicate and celebrate those successes so that people understand that process of how you got there to that success as well.
And I think at some point, we're going to tip the balance.
Yeah.
And it's all about us trying to climb that mountain to tip the balance so that, we have more change supporters and innovators in the organization than we do deterrents or detractors.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Valerie. Stephen, do you want to just expand a little bit on the answer that you put in? Because I don't think everyone will be able to see your answer in the question, but you've said in here about you've seen experimentation work best when it isn't treated as a side project.
Yeah, it's, a lot of times when I've been asked to present to, deputies or boards, if it's a crown corporation, a lot of times we get asked, well, what's our digital strategy? What's our AI strategy, right? And the problem, sometimes is the interpretation that innovation is about doing, right? Like, well, we're going to do digital. We're going to do something with AI. And what what to try to do is change it into, well, who are you? Like, who do you want to be when you grow up, right? And that's a lot of executives like to say that, like around the table, is who do we want to be when we grow up? And that's the right answer. And I go back to what Canada's first Minister of Digital, Scott Bryson, said in 2016. We're a blockbuster government in a Netflix world, and you have to kind of appreciate the profoundness of that statement. And as simple as it is, but it was, our business model is failing in today's digital world. Right? And this is exactly how Blockbuster failed, was through hubris, saying people don't want to stream movies. They want to come and they want the experience of coming to get the movies and pick them, and late fees. They love that, right? And so I'm not saying government has that attitude, but what I'm saying is the idea that the mind shift had to go from, we are a digital society, which means we need to act and think in that way. And when you have an innovation lab, what happens is it's interpreted that they're doing digital. And it's not my problem as the business owner, it's somebody else's problem. And when it's done, it's the CIO's problem. And that's one of the biggest issues that we have, is we've created these positions with the word digital in it, with the word AI in it, which signals to the rest of the organization that somebody else is taking care of it. Even chief data officer, and I've told Erica this many times, and I feel sorry, right? Like, I have this sympathy, because then everybody says data is your problem. And that couldn't be further from the truth. It is everybody's domain, and we have to work together. Again, back to the choreography. So that's why when, back to Cameron's question, we have to stop compartmentalizing it into a role innovation or into a set of roles. And we have to make this part of the culture, which means that we have to open up the senior leadership mindset to reducing or accepting the risk that is associated with innovation, right? And that we do accept in the open and transparent, kind of ether that we're going to be trying things, but we're going to be maturing ourselves to be to be good enough to know when to stop. And that goes into Terry's question, which is next, which is kind of like, what are the too big to fail things, right? Why do we keep moving things forward when it's too big to fail? So it's elements like that. So I think that's going to be really, really important to make sure that we interweave the culturally bit by bit into the day-to-day operations governance structures of the organization so that people have that literacy of and they understand the notion of just enough risk, just enough investment, just enough technology, right? To be able to move things forward as opposed to big bang.
Thanks, Stephen. I think Erica and Erica probably do think that data is their responsibility, but as you said, it should be everybody else's as well, not just look to them, definitely. And as you say, it's time for our final question. We've got a great question in from Terry here. But I'm not sure this is quite right in that Terry says, Erica Curtin, that you mentioned the book How Big Things Get Done. I think you mentioned a slightly different book, which was Think Slow, Act Fast. Am I right? I think these are maybe two different books. But Terry is saying How Big Things Get Done is a tremendous book. But Terry's saying the public sector is always going to have the reality of multi-dimensional stakeholders, complexity and nuance. And in that context, especially as we redefine sovereignty and run headlong into all things AI, what has to happen in terms of those getting big things done? So this not being able to walk away, because like Stephen was saying, too big to fail. Building piece by piece and understanding your valuable outcomes first and working back. So I think it's just that sense of how do you innovate in this complexity when you can't really fail all the time? You have to be delivering for your citizens. So it's a big question for us to finish on. I'm going to start with Erica Wren. So Erica, in this complexity, the reality of all of this, it's great to be able to experiment, but we do have to get things done and we do have to get things done fast, don't we? So how do we balance those tensions?
Many things. I think in the government, we should start with we talk about minimum viable product. I think we should talk about minimum viable governance and really in terms of focusing on what needs to be done and the outcomes and having a business lead owning that outcomes and talk to the people that are accountable for certain decisions, and everybody else can just be informed. So I think there's a lot of processes in terms of speed to delivery. We have lots of work to do in streamlining that processes, the decisions by committees, and I don't think decisions should ever be made by consensus. If we can just do that one thing, that one little thing, you'd be surprised at how fast we can move and how much money we can save.
Yeah. So that complexity is not an excuse, is it, to not innovate and to not experiment? No. Stephen, your final thoughts on this question?
Well, again, yeah, it's we need to like if I back away from it and say there's a macro issue that we're dealing with, and it really is about, we talk about too big to fail, it's because we've let it get too big. Right. And I don't think transformation should actually happen in the increments that we're seeing it happen now. When I'm speaking with ADMs and DMs and they're telling me, oh, yeah, I got an invoice for $100 million. I got an invoice for $20 million. I'm shaking my head and I'm thinking, well, if you get an invoice for that much, you should be able to harvest the benefit of the impact that invoice paid for. And most times it's like, well, no, we just kind of made it to the next step. And again, I have to shake my head because transformation should be happening $2 million at a time, like at most, right? Like, and And you need to be able to like we need to challenge ourselves like together, right? Like the government and the vendor community to be able to say, so if we had this much money, could we create an impact that if we walked away from it, we've made an advancement? And if that's true, and I guarantee you it can be true, then then we're doing things right. If the answer is no, then we got to go back to the drawing board, challenge ourselves again, and rethink how we do it. Now, you can chain all of these things together to create a larger transformation, but if all it is all or nothing, that becomes the issue, and that's a culture that we've created over time. We've allowed ourselves to create over time, and I'm saying like the vendor community plus government together have worked together to create that culture. And
Yeah.
it's time to back out of that and start to challenge ourselves into a much more iterative, smaller, quicker, pivotable type
Mm.
of pathway, right? Because innovation requires pivots, fast pivots. So this way you're going to minimize your perceived failures, and you're going to be redefining what a win is. And those wins will come, and you will harvest those wins, and then you move on to the next win. I think that's going to be really, really key.
Thanks, Stephen. Valerie, and then Erica, Kirsten, we started with you, so I'll finish with you. But Valerie, first, your thoughts on this big picture question.
Yeah. Um, I think there's a time and place for vendors, and it's not about big bills any longer. I think innovation happens in grassroots, right on the ground, with frontline staff, with citizens in the community, with partners that are helping us get there. And it is, I think, for us, incremental, small, MVP scale from there. Um, I think I like the analogy that Stephen used with Blockbuster. Government, we've taken the position that government is going to be disrupted. So if we don't internally disrupt ourselves, we're going to be victims of that too. And we already see it happening, right, around us, to us. And so if we can't innovate and add value quickly in the spaces we should be, we really need to question the role of government in the future. And I think when you first stated that question, what was brought to my mind was, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
Mm.
And I think you just need to start with something small, start with something that's going to add impact and value, and make sure that it keeps you in business. So if we're here to serve citizens, then it has to add value to citizens, or it's not going to matter at the end of the day.
Thanks, Valerie. So some fundamental thinking then shifting of kind of the way we approach this. Erica, Kirsten, last thoughts from you on this big question.
Yeah, lots covered here. The book that I mentioned, I think, is the same one that is being mentioned, by the way.
Okay.
By the sounds of it. But what we need to do is look at the competing pressures in government, right? We want the speed of innovation, but we still have regulations and legislation that compete with some of that. We want sovereignty, but we have existing ecosystems of our technologies. We want to be more efficient, but we still need to be equitable in the way that we are implementing. So I think those are really important to continually challenge those competing pressures and see how we can think differently. Ultimately, we have a responsibility to deliver, and we need to make sure, and it's kind of tying in Sarah's questions earlier, we need to create a culture. We need to change the culture. And I think we have a real opportunity with AI and the work that we're doing in this space to really think differently in how we deliver. But it's creating that psychological space and safety that is built on trust within our own teams that can be delivering for the future. So it's how we treat our failures to be able to then leverage those learnings to bring our team members along. I have to say, the best teams that I've ever worked on and the ones that have delivered the most, first of all, the team composition wasn't an afterthought. You wanted to look at their skills and experience. It doesn't mean, obviously you need some expertise in wherever you're working, but it's making sure you have that diversity of views and cultures and regional perspective to represent those that we're serving, making sure that you have people that are really focused on delivering integrity quite frankly, within the teams, I think is really important, some of those soft skills. But making sure that even though you don't have the expertise, it's being open to people being able to contribute and learn and experiment with each other, and then bringing in some of those views if you don't have them, or some of that expertise to complement what you're doing. So I think, kind of just wrapping what everybody has said today, I think we have that responsibility to do that with how we're handling these big projects and these big problems. And it's multidimensional. It really is.
Fantastic. Thank you. And in many ways, isn't it? It's because of that complexity and because of all those challenges, we have to be more creative and we have to be more innovative to meet those demands that are facing the public sector all around the world. We are exactly on time. Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you to Erica Kirsten. Thank you to Erica Wren. Thanks to Stephen. Thanks to Valerie. Terry has just said, yes, it is the same book, Erica. So sorry if I confused everybody there. Thank you so much for that conversation. Really did give lots of food for thought. And I think, as you're saying, lots going on, but lots of issues to consider in terms of the reality of those constraints within which people are operating. Thank you to Stephen and to Livio for being our knowledge partner today. Really great to have you on the panel. To the audience, thank you for all your questions. We have sent all of you a questionnaire. If you don't mind just spending a couple of minutes filling that in, it means we can keep giving you webinars on the topics that are of most interest and value to you. So I'd be really grateful if you could do that. We will send a link of this video to everybody who registered. So even to those who weren't able to join live, you can watch it on catch up. But to those who did join us here live, you can share it with colleagues and friends if you think it would be useful for them. And we will also be sharing a write-up with the key points from today's conversation in a short while. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day, and I look forward to seeing you all again on one of our webinars very shortly, I hope. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to our great panel. Thanks.
Thank
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.